Urban combat in the Vietnam War represented one of the most dangerous and complex forms of fighting faced by American and Allied forces. Unlike jungle or rural operations, cities compressed the battlefield into narrow streets, dense neighborhoods, and multi-story buildings where visibility was limited and danger existed in every direction. In these environments, the advantages of firepower and mobility were reduced, and combat often became a slow, methodical struggle, fought room by room and block by block. Vietnamese cities were not designed for modern warfare. Many were composed of tightly packed structures built from concrete, brick, and stone, often reinforced over time. Narrow alleys connected residential blocks, while marketplaces, government buildings, and religious sites created dense clusters of cover. These conditions favored defenders who could move unseen, establish firing positions inside buildings, and withdraw through back routes invisible from the street. Enemy forces operating in urban areas relied heavily on concealment and surprise. Fighters blended in with the civilian population, using normal clothing and familiar surroundings to mask their presence. Weapons were hidden inside homes, behind false walls, or beneath floors. Observation posts were established in upper stories, allowing enemy units to watch troop movement and direct fire from protected positions. From these vantage points, even a small number of defenders could slow or halt advancing forces. For American units, urban combat required a fundamental shift in tactics. Large formations and wide maneuver were impractical. Infantry squads operated in small elements, moving cautiously through streets while covering windows, rooftops, and doorways. Every intersection became a potential ambush point. Every building had to be treated as occupied until proven otherwise. Advancing forces faced threats not only from the front, but from above and below. Snipers fired from upper floors or rooftops. Grenades were dropped from stairwells. Enemy fighters used interior walls to move between rooms without exposure, emerging suddenly at close range. Tunnels and hidden passages allowed movement beneath streets, enabling defenders to appear behind advancing units or escape after brief engagements. House-to-house fighting was slow and exhausting. Soldiers cleared buildings one at a time, often using explosives or heavy weapons to breach walls rather than enter through doorways. This technique reduced exposure, but caused significant destruction. Once inside, rooms were searched systematically. Staircases, hallways, and courtyards were especially dangerous, as defenders could engage attackers at extremely close distances. Street fighting presented its own hazards. Open roads offered little protection from fire originating in surrounding buildings. Vehicles were vulnerable to rocket launchers, grenades, and mines placed beneath debris. Rubble from destroyed structures limited movement and created additional cover for defenders. Progress through urban terrain was often measured in yards rather than blocks. Supporting arms played a critical role, but were difficult to employ effectively. Artillery and airstrikes risked damaging civilian infrastructure and causing unintended casualties. Fire support had to be carefully coordinated and was sometimes limited to prevent further destruction. In many cases, infantry units were forced to rely primarily on small arms, machine guns, and direct fire weapons to advance. Communications were another challenge. Thick walls and dense construction interfered with radio signals, making coordination between units difficult. Commanders often had to operate from forward positions to maintain control, increasing their exposure to enemy fire. Confusion was common, particularly when units became separated inside the maze of streets and buildings. Urban combat also placed extraordinary psychological strain on those involved. The constant need for vigilance, the inability to identify the enemy quickly, and the presence of civilians added layers of complexity not present in other forms of fighting. Soldiers had to distinguish between non-combatants and enemy fighters who deliberately used the environment to blur that distinction. Enemy forces exploited these conditions whenever possible. Ambushes were carefully planned to strike advancing units at their most vulnerable points. After brief engagements, defenders often withdrew through pre-planned routes, forcing attacking forces to repeat the clearing process again and again. The objective was not always to hold ground, but to delay, exhaust, and inflict casualties. Urban fighting in Vietnam demonstrated that control of a city required more than capturing key buildings. Entire neighborhoods had to be secured, searched, and held to prevent enemy re-infiltration. This demanded manpower, time, and coordination, often stretching units beyond their original mission scope. The lessons learned from these battles influenced future military doctrine. Urban terrain negated many technological advantages and forced armies to adapt to close-range combat under constant threat. The experience showed that cities could quickly become some of the most costly and difficult battlefields in any conflict. The footage from Vietnam captures only fragments of these operations. Soldiers moving cautiously through shattered streets, clearing buildings under fire, and advancing through environments where every structure concealed danger. Together, these images illustrate a form of warfare defined by proximity, uncertainty, and relentless pressure. Urban combat in Vietnam was not fought for spectacle or speed. It was fought through persistence, discipline, and the slow application of force in spaces never meant to become battlefields. It remains one of the clearest examples of how modern war changes when it enters the city. Thank you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate our subscribers and those who watch our videos.